do not belong in this line, sweetheart." The words were not a question, they were a command delivered with a sneer that twisted the speaker's mouth into an ugly shape. The shove that followed was sharp, a calculated check of the shoulder meant to unbalance, to dominate, to clear the path.
Christine Sharp stumbled only slightly. Her boots, civilian hiking boots, not issued combat boots, skidded an inch on the polished linoleum of the mess hall floor. She caught herself with a grace born of core strength and muscle memory, her hands snapping out to grip the stainless steel railing of the tray line. She did not drop her tray, she did not gasp, she merely stabilized her footing, took a slow breath, and turned her head. The man looming over her was a wall of muscle and marpat camouflage. He was a sergeant, likely in his mid-20s, with a high and tight haircut that looked razor fresh and sleeves rolled with obsessive precision. His name tape read Vance. He was flanked by two other Marines, corporals by the look of their youth and deference, who were snickering into their hands. "This is a chow hall for Marines," Vance said, stepping into her personal space. His voice was pitched loud enough to carry over the din of clattering silverware and low conversation. He wanted an audience. He wanted a show. Not for dependents, not for lost civilians, and definitely not for someone who looks like she got lost on the way to the mall. Christine looked at him. She was wearing a royal blue, moisture-wicking top, long-sleeved and fitted, the kind one wore for a long run on a chilly morning. Her long blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, but strands had escaped, framing a face that bore no makeup, only the flush of physical exertion and the calm, icy stare of someone who had seen things Sergeant Vance could not imagine. "Excuse me, Sergeant," Christine said. Her voice was low, devoid of fear. It was a flat, resonant tone that usually made people stop and listen. "I am in line for chow. The sign outside says all hands welcome until 1300. It is 12:45. Vance laughed, a harsh barking sound. He looked at his friends. "Did you hear that? She thinks she can quote the placard to me." He turned back to her, his chest puffed out, effectively blocking her access to the stack of plastic trays. "Listen, lady, I don't know who your husband is. I don't know if he's a staff sergeant or a lieutenant. Honestly, I don't care. But this line is for the working party coming off the range. We have been eating dust for 6 hours. You look like you've been eating bonbons. You can wait until the Marines are fed. Step aside." He moved to shove her again, physically using his chest to herd her away from the serving line. Christine planted her feet. She did not move. It was like shoving a statue bolted to the deck. "I suggest you check your bearings, Sergeant," she said. The volume of her voice did not rise, but the temperature of it dropped 10 degrees. "You are making a scene, and you are violating the very discipline you claim to represent." Vance's face reddened. The quiet defiance insulted him more than a scream would have. A scream was weakness. Silence was a challenge. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The smell of CLP gun oil and stale sweat rolled off him. "My bearing is fine," he spat. "My problem is civilians thinking they own the place because they married a uniform. Now move, or I will have the MPs escort you out for loitering and harassment." The mess hall had gone quiet in their immediate vicinity. Marines at nearby tables, mostly junior enlisted, heads shaved, eyes wide, paused with forks halfway to their mouths. It was the train wreck dynamic. Nobody wanted to watch, but nobody could look away. They saw a large, aggressive NCO bullying a woman in a blue shirt who looked barely older than 30, though her eyes looked ancient. They saw the disparity in size. They saw the injustice. But they also saw the stripes on Vance's collar. In the rigid hierarchy of the mess hall, intervening against a sergeant when you were a private first class was a good way to spend your weekend scrubbing dumpsters. So they watched. They shifted uncomfortably. They waited for her to break, to cry, to run away. She did none of those things. Christine simply adjusted her stance, widening her base. She looked past Vance, scanning the room, not for help, but assessing the environment. Her eyes tracked the exits, the spacing of the tables, the line of sight to the galley. It was a reflex, an old habit that never truly died. "You are blocking the line, Sergeant," she said. Vance grabbed a tray from the stack aggressively, snapping it off the pile and shoving it toward her chest, stopping just short of hitting her. "Get lost. Go to the commissary if you're hungry. This is a place for warriors." The word hung in the air, heavy and misused. Warriors. For a split second, the fluorescent lights of the mess hall seemed to flicker in Christine's vision. The smell of industrial cleaner and Salisbury steak vanished, replaced by the copper tang of blood and the acrid scent of burning diesel. She wasn't in North Carolina anymore. She was in a dusty, sun-bleached courtyard in Ramadi. The heat was pressing down like a physical weight. She was looking at a young corporal, much younger than Vance, holding a pressure dressing against a femoral bleed, his hands slick and shaking. She remembered the sound of the incoming mortar, the whistle that cut through the prayer call. She remembered the calmness that had washed over her then, the absolute clarity of command when the world was falling apart. She remembered taking the radio, calling the 9-line medevac while returning fire with her M4, her voice steady enough to calm the men around her. The image flashed and vanished, lasting no longer than a heartbeat. It was a phantom limb of memory, triggered by the arrogance of a man who used the word warrior like a club rather than a burden. Christine blinked, the mess hall rushing back into focus. She looked at the tray hovering inches from her chest, then up at Vance's sneering face. "I am going to get my lunch," she said, her voice dropping an octave, taking on a timbre that vibrated with absolute authority. "And you are going to step aside. If you touch me again, Sergeant, the consequences will be severe." Vance blinked. He hadn't expected that tone. It sounded too much like his battalion commander. But he looked at her, the blonde ponytail, the blue athletic shirt, the lack of visible rank, and his bias overrode his instincts. "Is that a threat?" Vance stepped closer, towering over her. "You threatening a non-commissioned officer of the United States Marine Corps?" "I am promising you, Sergeant, there is a difference." At a table near the drink dispensers about 20 feet away, Lance Corporal Diaz sat frozen. He was holding a half-eaten burger, his eyes locked on the confrontation. He had been watching from the beginning, feeling that sick knot of secondhand embarrassment and anger. He hated Vance. Everyone in the platoon hated Vance. He was the kind of leader who confused cruelty with strength, who smoked the Joes for minor infractions while skating on his own duties. But Diaz wasn't looking at Vance. He was looking at the woman. He had seen her before. Not here. Not in person. He squinted, trying to place the face. The long blonde hair threw him off. In the picture he had seen, her hair had been pulled back into a tight regulation bun hidden under a cover, but the profile was identical. The way she held her chin, the terrifying stillness of her posture. He looked at the wall near the entrance of the mess hall where the chain of command photos were usually displayed. They weren't visible from here, but he remembered the induction brief he'd sat through 3 days ago, the slideshow, the history of the unit. His eyes widened. He dropped his burger. It hit the plastic tray with a dull thud. "Holy smokes," he whispered. His buddy, a private first class named Jenkins, nudged him. "What, you know her? Is she Vance's ex or something?" Diaz shook his head frantically. No, man, look at her wrist." Jenkins squinted. "What, she's wearing a watch." "Not the watch," Diaz hissed. "The bracelet? The black metal one?" Jenkins looked closer. The woman in the royal blue shirt had a simple black memorial band on her right wrist. It was scuffed, worn down to the silver metal on the edges. "So, lots of people wear KIA bracelets," Jenkins said. Diaz was already scrambling out of his chair. He grabbed his tray, dumped it into the trash with a crash, and didn't bother to stack it. He just needed to get away from the blast radius. "Where are you going?" Jenkins asked, confused. "I have to make a call," Diaz said, his voice trembling. "If that is who I think it is, Vance is about to commit career suicide, and I am not going to be standing next to him when the bolt of lightning hits." Diaz practically ran to the exit, dodging incoming Marines. He burst out of the double doors into the bright afternoon sun and fumbled for his phone. His hands were shaking. He knew he shouldn't jump the chain of command, but this was different. This was an emergency. He dialed the number for the staff duty officer at Battalion HQ. "Staff duty, Sergeant Higgins," the voice answered. Sergeant, this is Lance Corporal Diaz, Charlie Company. You need to get the Sergeant Major down to the mess hall now. Whoa, slow down, Diaz. What's going on? A fight? Not yet, Diaz said, pacing in a tight circle on the concrete. But Sergeant Vance is currently physically blocking a woman from the chow line. He shoved her. He's screaming at her. So? Higgins sounded bored. Vance is a jerk. If it's a dependent, let the MPs handle it. It's not a dependent, Sergeant, Diaz half shouted, covering his other ear to block out the wind. I'm pretty sure it's General Sharp. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the electronics. Say again, Lance Corporal? General Sharp, Diaz repeated. Christine Sharp, the new Deputy Commanding General for the entire installation. I saw her picture in the welcome brief. She's in civvies. She's wearing a blue running shirt. Vance thinks she's a spouse. He just told her to get lost. The sound of a chair scraping violently against the floor came through the phone. Are you sure, Diaz? Higgins's voice had jumped an octave. If you are wrong about this, I'm looking through the window right now, Diaz said, pressing his face to the glass. She's standing at parade rest. Basically, she hasn't moved. Vance is poking her in the shoulder. Sergeant, you need to get here. I'm alerting the CO. Stay on the line. No, hang up. I'm moving. The line went dead.
Back inside the mess hall, the tension had stretched to the breaking point. Vance had not backed down. If anything, the lack of reaction from the woman had infuriated him further. He felt foolish standing there, yelling at a wall of calm, and his ego demanded a victory. I'm done asking, Vance growled. He gestured to the two corporals behind him. Escort this civilian out of the building. If she resists, detain her for the MPs. The two corporals exchanged a nervous glance. They were younger, less invested in Vance's power trip, and something about the woman's eyes made their stomachs turn. Sergeant, maybe we should just let her eat, one of them mumbled. I gave you a direct order, Vance snapped, not looking at them. Get her out of my face. One of the corporals hesitantly stepped forward. Ma'am, please just go. We don't want any trouble. Christine looked at the young corporal. Her expression softened, just a fraction. It was the look a mother gives a child who is about to touch a hot stove. Do not touch me, Corporal, she said softly. You are following an unlawful order. Stand down. The authority in her voice froze the corporal in his tracks. He looked at Vance, then back at her, paralyzed. Unlawful? Vance scoffed. He stepped around the corporal, his patience exhausted. I decide what's lawful in my sector, lady. He reached out, grabbing her upper arm with a grip meant to bruise. The reaction was instantaneous. Christine did not strike him. She did not throw him over her hip. That would have been assault, and she was too disciplined for that. Instead, she performed a small, precise rotation of her arm, leveraging the mechanics of his grip against his thumb. It was a joint lock technique executed with minimal effort but maximum torque. Vance yelped, his grip breaking instantly. He stumbled back, clutching his hand. You assaulted me, he shouted, his face turning a mottled purple. That's assault on a federal officer. I removed your hand from my person, Christine corrected him, smoothing the sleeve of her royal blue top. You initiated physical contact. I neutralized it. I highly recommend you stop talking, Sergeant. You are digging a hole that you will not be able to climb out of. I'm having you arrested, Vance screamed, pointing a finger at her. You're done. You hear me? You are going to jail. The doors to the mess hall burst open. It wasn't just one door, the main entrance, the side exit, the galley loading dock. Suddenly, the ambient noise of the mess hall, the chewing, the talking, the clattering died instantly. Through the main doors strode a phalanx of Marines. At the front was a lieutenant colonel, his face a mask of absolute panic and fury. Flanking him was a sergeant major, a man whose width seemed to equal his height, his face set in a grimace of impending violence. Behind them were 3 other officers and a master gunnery sergeant. They didn't walk, they marched, a wave of green and khaki cutting through the room. Vance turned, seeing the battalion commander. A smug grin broke across his face. He assumed they were here for him, that someone had called about the crazy civilian attacking a Marine. Colonel, Vance shouted, snapping to attention but keeping his voice aggrieved. Sir, this civilian just assaulted me. She refused to leave the mess hall and... The lieutenant colonel didn't even look at Vance.
He walked right past him, the wind of his passage rustling Vance's uniform. The sergeant major, however, did stop. He stopped inches from Vance's nose. "Shut your mouth, Sergeant," the sergeant major hissed. The sound was like a tire blowing out. "If you say one more word, I will personally weld your mouth shut." Vance froze, his eyes bulging. "What?" The lieutenant colonel stopped 3 feet in front of Christine. He took a breath, squared his shoulders, and snapped a salute so sharp it vibrated. The sergeant major turned from Vance and saluted. The 3 officers behind them saluted. The master gunnery sergeant saluted. The entire room, seeing the battalion commander saluting a woman in a blue t-shirt and hiking boots, fell into a stunned, breathless silence. Chairs scraped as Marines realized something massive was happening. Instinctively, every Marine in the line of sight stood up and snapped to attention, even if they didn't know why. "Good afternoon, General," the lieutenant colonel said, his voice ringing clearly in the dead silence. "My humblest apologies for the delay. We were not aware you were conducting an inspection of the facilities today." Christine Sharp stood there, surrounded by the high brass of the battalion. She looked at the lieutenant colonel, then slowly returned the salute. Her motion was casual, but perfect, the muscle memory of 20 years. She lowered her hand. "I wasn't conducting an inspection, Colonel," she said. Her voice was conversational, yet it carried to the back of the room. "I was attempting to get lunch. I just finished a 10-mile ruck on the perimeter trail and wanted a salad. However, it seems my presence was objectionable to some of your NCOs." She turned her head slowly, her blue eyes locking onto Sergeant Vance. Vance was pale, not just white. He looked like the blood had been drained from his body with a pump. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on the dock. His hands were trembling at his sides. "General," he whispered. The word barely had enough air to exist. Christine took a step toward him. The lieutenant colonel and sergeant major stepped aside, clearing the path. "Brigadier General Christine Sharp," she said, "assuming command of the installation as of 0800 tomorrow. But today, I am just a Marine trying to eat." She looked at Vance's name tape. "Sergeant Vance," she read aloud. Yes, ma'am, General, ma'am," Vance stammered. "You told me that this mess hall was for warriors," Christine said. I didn't know." "That is not the point, Sergeant," she cut him off. "It does not matter if I was a general, a private, a spouse, or a contractor. You treated a human being with contempt because you thought you had the power to do so. You used your rank as a bludgeon. You confused bullying with leadership." She gestured to the room around them. "Look at these Marines, Sergeant. They are watching you. They are learning from you. And what did you teach them today? Did you teach them honor? Did you teach them courage? Or did you teach them that the strong should prey on the weak?" Vance looked down at his boots. The shame was radiating off him in waves. "Look at me," Christine ordered. Vance snapped his head up, tears of humiliation welling in his eyes. "There was a time," she said, her voice softening slightly, becoming less of a hammer and more of a knife. "In a place called Sangan. I was a captain then. We were clearing routes. It was hot, dusty, and miserable. We had a corporal who acted just like you. He thought he was God's gift to the Corps. He treated the locals like dirt. He treated his juniors like servants." She paused, letting the story settle over the room. "When we took fire, when the ambush hit, that corporal froze. He was so used to being the bully that when he met someone bigger and meaner than him, he crumbled. It was his juniors, the ones he tormented, who pulled him out of the kill zone. They saved his life not because he deserved it, but because they were Marines." She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper now, intended only for him. "You are wearing the same uniform they wore. You are wearing the eagle, globe, and anchor. Do not tarnish it with your arrogance. A uniform doesn't make you a warrior, Sergeant. Character does. And right now, your character is out of uniform." She held his gaze for a long, agonizing moment. Then she stepped back. "Sergeant Major," Christine said, turning to the senior enlisted advisor. The sergeant major snapped to attention. "Yes, General." Please ensure Sergeant Vance receives remedial training on the core values, and I believe he has a lot of energy to burn. Perhaps he can assist the mess duty crew. I noticed the pots in the scullery look like they could use a very thorough scrub. General, consider it done." The sergeant major glared at Vance. "You heard the general. Get to the scullery, move."
Vance didn't hesitate. He practically sprinted away, vanishing into the steamy depths of the kitchen, desperate to escape the hundreds of eyes boring into him. Christine turned back to the lieutenant colonel. "Colonel, I'm sorry to disrupt your chow," she said, her tone returning to a polite, professional cadence. "Not at all, General," the colonel said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Would you like to join us at the command table?" Christine looked at her empty tray. Then she looked at the salad bar. "Thank you, Colonel, but I think I'll just grab my salad and sit with the troops. I have a lot to learn about this base, and I find the lance corporals usually know more about what's really going on than the staff officers." She smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed her face. "Besides," she added, glancing toward the table where Lance Corporal Diaz was sitting, staring at her in awe, "I think someone over there recognized me and had the courage to make a call. That's the kind of initiative I like to see." She walked over to the salad bar. The line of Marines parted like the Red Sea. "After you, General," a young private said, gesturing to the tongs. Christine shook her head. "No, Devil Dog, you were here first. Leaders eat last." She waited her turn. The fallout was swift, but it wasn't the public execution many expected. General Sharp didn't believe in destroying careers for a single mistake, even a grievous one. She believed in correction. Sergeant Vance spent the next 3 weeks on mess duty. He scrubbed pots until his hands were raw. He mopped floors. He served chow to the very privates he had mocked. It was humbling. It was grueling. And it was exactly what he needed. One afternoon, toward the end of his punishment, General Sharp returned to the mess hall. She was in uniform this time, service alphas, the stars on her collar gleaming. She walked through the serving line. Vance was there, spooning mashed potatoes onto trays. He saw her coming and stiffened. He looked tired. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by a weary exhaustion. "Good afternoon, Sergeant Vance," she said, pausing in front of him. "Good afternoon, General," Vance said, his voice steady, respectful. "How is the scullery?" "It's instructive, General." "Good." Christine looked at the serving spoon in his hand. "You know, Vance, the best leaders are the servants. If you can't serve the men, you can't lead them. Do you understand that now?" "Yes, ma'am, I do, truly." Christine nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a coin. It wasn't a standard commander's coin. It was smaller, battered, with the emblem of her old unit from Iraq on one side. She placed it on the metal shelf of the serving line next to the mashed potatoes. "Keep this," she said, "not as a reward, but as a reminder. Every time you feel that ego flaring up, touch this coin. Remember how it felt to scrub these pots. Remember that you are no better than the Marine standing in front of you." She picked up her tray and moved down the line. Vance stared at the coin. He picked it up, his thumb running over the rough metal. He looked up at the general's retreating back, and for the first time in his career, he didn't feel fear or resentment. He felt gratitude. He put the coin in his pocket, squared his shoulders, and looked at the next Marine in line, a nervous private who looked terrified of him. "Potatoes or rice, Marine?" Vance asked. "Potatoes, Sergeant?" Vance smiled. It wasn't a sneer. "Here you go. Plenty of gravy. Eat up. We've got a long afternoon ahead." Across the room at a corner table, General Sharp watched. She took a bite of her salad, nodded once to herself, and opened her notebook. The base was in good hands as long as the standards were kept. And standards, she knew, started with the small things, like knowing who was standing next to you in line. If you enjoyed this story of justice and leadership, please like the video and subscribe to Military Stories. We share stories every week that honor the women who serve, the sacrifices they make, and the quiet strength they carry long after the uniform comes off. Help us keep these stories alive. Semper Fi.